from somebody who has been living amongst this and talking with people who are in this world, can you give an actual size, scope, and scale of these organizations and talk about how it's not just, yes, there is the violence. Yes, they are involved in human trafficking and drug smuggling and all that, but just how far their tentacles actually reach out, because it is far more than that. And for people who don't have the chance for these conversations, they hit the wave tops and they think because they only get the wave tops that it should be an easy solution. But I think once you explain how far and permeated their influence is, it breaks it down for people a little bit, the complexity.
Okay, so it's very deep rooted, right? And I mentioned how it's rooted within the government,
Mm-hmm.
and then these cartels also are employing thousands of people internationally too, by the way, and have endless resources and money to continue moving this operation along. And then also, it's entrenched in the culture. So, our music and movies and celebrities down here um, sing and talk about and glamorize the narco cartel culture
Hmm.
and also become victim of it. I mean, just recently in Mazatlan, Sinaloa, Grupo Frontera, which is like a music group, was going to perform at the carnival there, and there's these things called narcomantas, which are basically like banners that have handwritten threats on them. Sorry, before they were about to perform, one of those banners showed up with a decapitated head on it saying, if Grupo Frontera performs, we'll kill everyone, including the guy who turns on the lights. So it
Whoa.
is so, yeah. Um, and this is something that's been going on for years. I mean, we could go back to when Chalino Sanchez was a very famous Mexican singer was assassinated after he performed, and there's this viral sort of video that's turned into a meme where as he's about to sing the song Alma Enamorada, someone hands him a note and he reads it and he's like sweating, and people assume that that was the threat of him either stop your performance or don't sing the song or you're dead. Well, but also the way that a lot of people are growing up is, my dad was in the cartel, my uncle, my older brothers, my neighbor. So what am I going to do when I grow up? You think that kid's going to decide to become a fucking dentist? No. So, and then also in a lot of smaller towns, perhaps, the cartel is also putting money into building those areas up, sort of like what Pablo Escobar did and why he was kind of referred to as Robin Hood. They're building schools, they're fixing up the hospitals, they're paying for certain kids' tuitions, they're paying for certain people's medical bills. In a way, they're doing charity for certain communities. And so when that's happening, it's really hard to convince these people who are already struggling financially to say, no, fuck these guys, they're the bad guys. How would you view them as the bad guys if, say, for example, this person just paid for your mom's cancer treatment? And so they have found ways to engrave themselves so and entrench themselves so deeply into Mexican communities, the culture, the government, politics, right? And so when that's the case, how do you go about dismantling organizations that are entrenched in every aspect of people's daily lives? Of course, there are a lot of people who do not fuck with the cartels and hate them. And, they live in Mexico and they say, we see so much violence, there's so much crime, we're tired of it. And
Mm-hmm.
my son has been missing for the last 10 years and I don't know where he was. And he wasn't even involved in this because there's also a lot of cases of kidnapping people, it's mistaken identity, or murdering people. And what are the cartels they're going to do? They're sorry, uh, accident, you know? And so there's a lot of suffering, but then there is a lot of charity that's being done by these guys in certain areas, and that's, in my opinion, very hard to dismantle because when the community has your back. I mean, come on, there's been instances where the we can go back to the 2019 Culiacanazo in Culiacan when El Chapo Guzman's son was arrested, Ovidio, and the city broke out into war. There was, shootouts between the police and the narcos and the public, and people were even backing up the narcos because the at that time in Culiacan, the Chapitos were even doing what I'm saying. They were paying for people's education, paying their medical bills. And so then the government comes in and then war breaks out. It's such a convoluted topic because I don't know how you could end something that's so deeply entrenched. And I sort of compare it to like, gangster rap in the 90s where that was glamorized in California
Oh,
and
for
the
sure.
East Coast. But this is so much more beyond that just because they almost run a lot of the regions of Mexico as if they were the government. I mean, some people even say like the cartels are the Mexican government, and the Mexican government it operates like a cartel because they profit off of allegedly profit off of the cartels. And then the cartels are running a lot of their regions that they have strongholds over, like as if they are the government. So to really understand just how deeply entrenched the cartels are in Mexico and also internationally, I mean, even in Canada, a lot of my sources over there, um, they have ties with the cartels. The cartels are actively there, bringing in the precursors for fentanyl,
Hmm.
producing it and trafficking it, employing, the straw buyers or traffickers. And so that kind of thing complicates it even more too, because when you have all these other countries and different nationalities, people who aren't Mexican, people who didn't grow up in cartel culture are now being employed by these very men. This is an international operation. And so for a lot of Americans, if they say, well, why don't we just go in there and just take them down? It's not, I get those comments all the time.
Well,
It's
that
not like
comment or
that.
question, I want to believe it comes from a good place, but I feel like that comment or question comes from somebody who just they don't understand how the world works. They're looking for light switch solutions where you just hit one
Yeah,
thing and it changes. And the reality is, it's more like a stereo equalizer, but there's 500 knobs, and you have to move them all a little bit at a time because every time you move one, another one shifts. I wish it was a light switch solution. I really do, but I
of
mean,
course, I think most do.
yeah, it's anything but.
It really is. It's so hard to tackle it, and then people ask me sometimes what do we need to do or what should be done, and I don't know because first of all, that's not my job. I'm not a political scientist. I just go and tell the stories and I gather information. Um, but also because every time there's a crackdown or they grab the big guy, someone else comes up out of the woodworks. I mean, right now something that we're not seeing as much, we're not talking about is the fact that the Sinaloa cartel, which has had a stronghold on Mexico for the longest time and has been a super powerful cartel, since the infighting began between the two factions of that cartel on September 9th, that cartel has been struggling. And there's another cartel called the Jalisco New Generation Cartel,
Yep.
which right now, is operating so under the radar that I mean, I give it 2 years, maybe max, and they're just going to be like the cartel.
Really?
Because, of course, because the Sinaloa cartel is failing. It's like a house of cards falling in on itself.
Hmm.
And, everyone is focused on that. The American CIA planes are flying over Sinaloa, are gathering intel to capture these guys. But once you dismantle that cartel, and it's been dismantling over the past couple of months, CJNG, which is a very powerful cartel and notoriously very violent. I mean, we've seen violence, but then there is also a level of propaganda that makes people believe it's like very violent.
Hmm.
Um, they're they're right now probably laughing. I mean, the leader of the Jalisco cartel, El Mencho, on the same day that those 29 were extradited to the United States, his wife was released from jail. And it just makes me wonder and his brother who was in jail was not extradited. And it's like,
Hmm.
what's going on? This is going to be that next top dog of cartels in Mexico, in the United States and Canada too. Actually, they're going to be the ones running it.